We are going to be talking about technical session number 34, as that is above 32. We know this is a 10:02 technical session. We're going to be talking about configuring Windows, getting everything set up, changed around to make it to where it is more functional for us or our organization. So throughout this particular technical session, we're going to describe how you can use the control panel, which is the primary place you'll go to customize a lot of this stuff, so you can set it up to the specifications and needs of yourself or a client. Also be able to describe the steps and considerations when configuring Windows for a client and identify common pitfalls that can occur when configuring Windows and how to solve them. You may be asking yourself, golly, do we have a test out lab for this? Because I would really like some practice. You're in luck. We absolutely do. So we will get the practice. In fact, I think there are quite a few labs. BSMs we want to take into account while working through this. Customer focus. Always remember, if we don't have the customers, we don't have a job. Solve the customer first, address their emotional state before we solve the problem, because many times when they're coming to us, they're at one of the most stressful parts of their career, because it may be a point they've lost presentations, they have important documents that they need for their job, things like that, and they're not able to access it, and they are coming to us to help mitigate that problem. Most times we're able to help, sometimes we're not. But we need to make sure we try to take care of them as best we can. And as always, start with the least invasive and simplest solutions first and work your way from there. Also, want to maintain a growth mindset. Our intelligence is not fixed. If it was fixed, none of us would be here. Your brain is like any other muscle. You just got to exercise it. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. All right, control panel. It's often the first place you will turn to when configuring any of the settings with regards to your operating system. It is a centralized location to control how Windows looks and functions. The programs that populate the control panel are called applets. So these are little mini applications internally within the control panel. So applets. They allow you to customize the system and personalize it for each user. Be it themes, color palettes, many things like that, because there are people who have various levels of color blindness. They may not be able to see in the palettes that are normally established on the Windows backgrounds and settings. You can adjust these to help accommodate these people. There actually was an instance of this. Diego, my mentor, was talking about when he was working in IT for UPS. Every time a person came in the morning, all their monitor settings were all messed up. He'd call into IT, try to figure out what was going on. A couple of times they tried replacing the monitor, and what it turned out was the person that was hot seating into it at night had partial color blindness and was changing the settings to be more warmer colors so that they could read the screens more readily. So sometimes, actually quite often, when you're dealing with a tech support issue, it is a user issue rather than a software or hardware issue. So the user issue is the most common you will be working with. That also carries over into security. Your biggest threat in any organization is the people. And most of that typically comes from being educated on the subject and understanding what is and is not acceptable. And social engineering plays such a huge role because we generally want to be nice to people. Like if we're entering into a building and we see somebody struggling with a huge amount of packages and we want to hold that door for them because we don't want to be a jerk, that's one of the methods that people will use to gain access to a secure building. They will play upon your good nature in order to gain access. So it's little things like that. All right. So in most versions of Windows, there are a number of applets that every version of Windows has in common. We'll be addressing a lot of those. There are also applets that are specific to a program or hardware, such as NVIDIA, Adobe, and QuickTime. Not every situation, but a lot of situations, you're going to be looking for user error, but that is going to come out in the initial conversation where you're talking to somebody and you're asking them to walk you through what happened so you can understand how the error started. It will start to become relatively obvious to you whether it is a user error, a system error, or something along those lines. All right, accessing the control panel, Windows 7, you click the start button on the start icon at the bottom left-hand side, and it is in the start menu itself. Windows 8 and 8.1, either swipe the right corner of the screen or use the mouse to activate the charms menu, and it is within there for 8.1. 10, click the start button, scroll until you see Windows System, click on it, and it will show a drop-down menu and control panels there. The other option is to click the little magnifying glass in the bottom left-hand side of the screen and just type in control panel. And that will bring it up for you. So there's a couple different ways you can access it depending on which version you're using and which is faster for you. Sometimes the search feature is just faster, especially if you can't remember exactly where something's located. Once opening the control panel, there's a couple different methods for locating applets. You can enter a search in the search bar, you can browse through categories, or you can view all the control panel items in a list. So you can base it by category, you can base it by large icons or small icons. And this comes down to personal preference. Now, I will say, if you are called upon to work on somebody's computer and you change the settings so it's easier for you to find it, remember to change it back to their settings. When you're searching by category, here's what it looks like. You have a variety of ones: your system and security, user accounts, ease of access, hardware and sound, all that kind of puts things into nice little buckets, and you can click on these and dive deeper and deeper as you see fit, depending on what you're trying to do. Next category, be large icons. So it will list out all the functions within control panel, but it'll just be in a large icon mode. And I believe small icons looks just like a list. So like this. For those of us who are not optically impaired, this may work. Me, after about 20 hours of staring at a screen, I kind of like having a little bit larger icons. It's a little bit easier in my eyes, not gonna lie. Then there's people like my son who read at 2-point font, so they like everything as little as possible so they can have everything on the screen at one time. All right, category view, 8 primary categories. We'll be going over each of these in a little bit more depth. They are listed here below. Based on what you're trying to accomplish, we'll push you into each one of these particular categories. We'll probably go through them right away. So first one up is category view, system and security. Inside here, we're going to be predominantly your security related applets. You have your action center, your firewall, which we talked about yesterday, and the action center, system control, Windows update, power options, especially if you're working on laptops. This is a really, really nice one. Backup and restore, critical. If you're wanting to protect your data, BitLocker, if you're wanting to do full drive encryption to protect all of your data in case somebody tries to access your system or steals a hard drive or something like that. This is a great security tool. and then other administrative tools and Flash Player as well for some reason. Yeah, there will be cases by category. They'll say, where would you go to find this? So this is where I struggled again because I hadn't worked in Windows for so long. I was learning from the book. So this was very, very much a stumbling block or stepping stone for me, perception, where I had to sit down and really focus on this and know where things were located because, again, I didn't have active use of it. I was operating off of a Mac. So next, network and internet, all your connectivity. So if we're going to be talking about, sharing on your internal network, setting up home groups, which we will talk about a little bit more in a future technical session, internet options, also setting up Wi-Fi, which Wi-Fi SSIDs are you going to say are acceptable to sign on to, which are not. You want to set it up so that if you don't predetermine it as good, it does not automatically go to it. This is a good thing to have up because there may be hackers who will set up a Wi-Fi near where you are and they'll put no password on it. So your system will auto link to it and then they can gain access to your data. So if it is not predetermined, make sure it asks you if it's okay to connect to said network. All right, hardware and sound, all those fun peripherals and ancillary things that we want to work with. So you got your printers, your sound settings. Do you want it coming out of internal speakers on the computer? Do you want it coming out of, like, I have a secondary monitor that's actually a TV. Do I want to use that monitor? Do I want to use headphones? If I'm using a microphone, likely I'm going to have to use headphones. Otherwise I get that fun little reverb that we kind of run across every now and again on here. So all of this stuff needs to be set up. Power options. How long do I want that system to be on before it goes into hibernation or turns off? All of these things. And that also falls into security, your power options. If you're away from your computer for more than a minute, what happens? Or 2 minutes? Do you want it to go into sleep mode and require a password to turn it back on? Do you want it to go into a screensaver? Something like that. These fall under security features as well, even though we're setting it here just to be more economical with our usage, especially for operating off of battery. And we can set it differently for when we're on battery versus when we're plugged in. Display settings. Are we using multi-monitor setups? Screensavers, all that kind of fun stuff established here. Windows Mobility Center, HP Power Manager, which is specific, obviously, to HPs, and then Beats audio control if you are using Beats on an HP as well. The last two are obviously HP specific application applets. Next, programs. Typically where you would install or uninstall programs on your machine. Many of you probably went through this this lab in test outs or in it's Coursera. Was it Coursera or was it test? It was Coursera. You probably did this lab in Coursera in week 4, I believe, or 5. Within the last day or two, or if not, you got something to look forward to. You get to do it in Linux and in Windows. Then we get to our gadgets that you wish to be added or removed, and then obviously Java. Next category, user accounts family. This is where we would establish what accounts we have on the system, what their authority level is, and if you want to have fun with other people in your household, you can set parental controls. You can do all sorts of entertaining stuff with parental controls. I have fun with it myself. Fun story, when they were first starting to do parental controls when I was a kid, my parents thought it would be super wise to get a TV that had parental controls on it, so me and my sister couldn't watch things like HBO and all that stuff. So they buy this, they get it home. Well, unfortunately for them, my sister and I figured out the parental controls before they did, And we established parental controls on QVC, C-SPAN, ESPN, all their channels. And then there was a really entertaining negotiation to get them the code so that they could go back and turn that off. All right. So, but parental controls also can be used for good, not just evil. You can set it up on children's computers if you so wish. And also, if you're going to be using it at an office, it's good to set up content control because you don't want employees surfing the high seas for software or movies when they're on the job, or going to gambling or adult sites and stuff like that. So we want to keep that to a minimum in the office. We can set content controls through the parental control system. All right. So next, appearance and personalization. Some people like to make their desktops look quite fancy. Some offices do not want that personalization. They want everything to be very uniform and kept professional. Unfortunately, if you've worked in an office environment, there's always one that ruins it for everybody. If they say, all right, it's Friday, we can wear shorts. You don't have to wear, jeans or khakis. We know it's Florida. It's 500 degrees outside. It's hot. You can wear shorts, but, use your best judgment. So everybody comes in and they have nice, clean shorts. They look good. And then you have the one guy coming in with, gym shorts with holes in it and 50 stains on it, looking like he just, worked on his car or something. And then the manager just looks at this and goes, you know what? No more short stays. Same things happen with personalization backgrounds. Most people will be professional. Some people will have extremely inappropriate backgrounds on their computers. So depending on where you work, this may be an option that you have to work with, or this may be one that they do not allow you to work with, or they may give you just a few options to choose from. So all right, next, clock, language, region. Pretty straightforward. This is where you're setting your date and time and where you're geographically located. Now, with this particular one, in the book, it's going to give you a path on how to get here. I'm going to tell you, they're going to want you to memorize that path. So in the book, they will give you the path where it was, the C colon users, all the way down to the time application, the path to get there. So like all the files you're gonna have to click through to get to it, they're gonna want that path. Please make sure to take note of that. We'll see it again. And then we'll, let you know what it is. And you're gonna wanna memorize it exactly because they're gonna give you 4 different paths and they're gonna jumble the steps up. So, test question warning. All right, lastly, we have ease of access. Speech recognition. Some people love to utilize this. Others are like, I do not want my computer turning on the microphone unless I tell it to. So some people may have this turned off and do not want it capable of doing this. Earlier iterations of speech recognition, it would require you to read a couple paragraphs so that the system can understand how you pronounce specific words, so it can better work for you, because everybody has an accent, just depends on where you're located. So, if I'm here where I grew up, I don't have an accent because everybody around me talks like me. But if I go up north, I now have one. Well, computers have a hard time distinguishing this. So they'll make you read a couple paragraphs just to clean things up a little bit and make it so that it understands you. The algorithm can pick up what you're saying. Also, you can let them request settings for you. Like if they see you continually doing certain things a specific way, they might say, hey, here's a shortcut for you, rather than, right clicking, copy, right click, paste. They'll probably say like, you know what, if you hit Control C, Control V, that will allow you to cut and paste as well. So it will offer up suggestions. So why would you do that to Cortana there, Mark? After all she did for the Master Chief, and you're just going to shut her down like that? All right. So other applets we're going to be getting into right here. Real quickly, just briefly touching on all of these so that we just kind of know where they are. Many of them are self-explanatory. We're just going to touch base on them real quick. All right, first, utilities. What do they do? Internet options. Obviously, this is where we're going to go to configure our internet settings. For internet options, we're going to provide, if we have dial-up, we got to provide phone numbers. We need to be able to tell it where is the gateway, you know, what is the gateway server to be able to get out. Are we going to use a static IP or are we going to use a dynamic IP? What subnet mask are we operating off of? All of these things will be explained later, but this is information that, you know, internet options are things that we're going to, you know, be addressing. Also, privacy, security, other pieces along the way as well. All right. Display and display settings. You want to be able to set your resolutions, color depth, and refresh rate of your monitors. Typically, this is done automatically because your monitor will talk to the computer and basically say, here's what I'm capable of. And then it will establish it to native settings. Sometimes we may need to tweak these things to make them, to clean up the imaging a little bit, because depending on what you're using it for, different image settings work better. So we may need to make adjustments depending on what we're doing. But for the most part, native settings tend to be the most optimal for your monitors. Also, this is where we would set up our dual monitor setups if we wanted to set it up, or triple monitor. Or if you're Laz, a TA I used to work for, the 6 monitor setup, which looks like, if you ever saw the movie Swordfish, it looked like the one that Hugh Jackman was using in that movie. Is there a button for native settings? But they will have they will have a space where, like, next to it in parentheses, it'll say native. So when you're looking through the various resolutions it has, there will be a bracket around one of them and say native. So it will indicate what is native. It may not just be like a little button. All right. Next, user accounts. Obviously, this is where we're setting up our users. How many different people are going to have access? Administrator, you should already be the administrator if you're setting up your user accounts, because that's who would be able to do that. Their level of access should be established within user accounts. Hint, hint, disable the guest account. If you want a guest account, create a user account with no privileges and then label it guest and give it a password. Turn off guest account. That is a security nightmare if you have that sucker available. So please, please have that turned off. All right. Folder options lets you configure the look and feel how your folders, you know, are. You can view hidden files, you can hide extensions, and other basic general options, like who can, like if you create a file or a document, who can read that document, who can see that document, who can edit or execute from that document. All this can be set up in your options. And finally, your system allows you to configure various elements within your system. Tons of different settings you can see there. You can look at your basically your setup for your computer. What kind of CPU are you running off of? What speeds? How many cores do you have? How much RAM do you have? You can check your index rating. Are you or are you not going to allow remote access? And then you can access your device manager from here, where you can set up and manage all of the peripherals hooked up to your computer. And then you can set up performance with your virtual memory. Does anybody remember what virtual memory is? What's another word we use for that? Virtual memory. It's 2 different names for it. And what do we use it for?
Swap and paging file.
Swap and paging file. Very good. What do we use that for? So swap file or page file. What do we use those for?
Virtual machines?
You
More
can,
specific?
To provide temporary expansion.
but you don't necessarily need to have virtual memory for a virtual machine. But yes, Stephen, temporary expansion or essentially RAM. We're using our hard drive as a RAM module. So it's going to read and write from the hard drive. Nowhere near as fast, not as efficient, but when your RAM gets overloaded, it immediately will jump to the swap or page file in order to kind of pick up the slack. So that's when things start to slow down. And then if you hear your drive continuously reading and writing from the hard drive, that is an indicator that you've run out of memory. So your RAM modules aren't able to keep up with what you're doing. So it is a short-term fix for the problem. Yeah, what's another short-term fix we could use for RAM? So we have the page and swap file. That's one way. What's another way we could temporarily alleviate pressure on the RAM modules? Say, I can't get to the store till next week to buy new RAM modules. So what do I do till then?
I know you could use a USB,
Okay.
but I forget what that last part of it. The USB has to be able to, I think, be configured to be ready to become the RAM, the additional RAM.
You are exactly right. You have the exact definition of what it is. We just need, what is it called? So very good.
Partition?
It's not a partition, but it is a USB drive. But what do we call it? It was a Windows feature. We actually talked about it yesterday.
That's the part I'm lagging on.
Okay. You want to phone a friend?
Yes. I see Jerusalem put ROM.
No, not quite. But ROM is read-only memory. That'd be like our firmware memory.
DW Hunter.
The answer starts with an R.
It does. Yeah, it does start with an R. 2 words put together. We could do charades, but I'm terrible at that game.
I'm sorry, what's the question again?
Rewritable.
No. So
Turbo blank.
if we have run out of memory of RAM, and one way that we can kind of alleviate that is using a paging file or a swap file by using the hard drive as RAM. What's another way we could kind of alleviate that pressure temporarily? Like I'm not able to get to the store till next week to buy some more RAM modules and I need to continue to work until then. What is another way I can do it? And Jessica gave a wonderful definition of it using a USB configured to act kind of like RAM. We're just trying to get the name of that. It is a Windows feature. There we go. Vincent coming in clutch. Ready, boost. Great job.
Thanks, Vincent. Yes, yes, yes.
Excellent job. So yes, ready boost. It's configuring a USB to act like RAM. It is not as efficient as RAM, but it will alleviate some pressure until you can do the upgrades later. Excellent. All right, Windows Firewall, as the name implies, this is an applet that can be used to manage the firewall, which will determine what communications can go in and out of the computer itself. This is a host-based firewall, host being the name for the computer. They do have hardware firewalls, which is a network device, which is a physical device that operates as a firewall. And then there are host-based applications, which is the host. So this will determine whether or not a program can communicate outside of that computer or not, based on the settings that you've given it. You can either use an ACL, which is an access control list, or you can use what is considered a stateful firewall, which is paying attention to that conversation, which says, I only allow communications to come in if I have initiated the conversation. I will not allow somebody outside to initiate that conversation. So I have to talk to them first if the communication is going to be allowed to pass. All right, power options. Different power schemes can be set up to essentially modify the power settings of the computer. You can tell it when to hibernate, various power plans after 15 minutes, shut down, sleep, suspend, and when to go into standby. Next, programs and features, formerly known as add and remove programs. This is where you would install and uninstall various programs with the system or features. Next, home group. Not available in Windows 7 Starter, but available in later options. It allows you to kind of set up your home network. It's mainly used for sharing files and printers and things like that. And libraries can only work computers at 7, 8, 8.1, and 10. And you cannot extend this outside of the group. So once it's set up within the group, you cannot extend that beyond the group. I believe home groups only allow up to 20, but optimally, it's either 20 or 25. I need to confirm that. But optimally, you don't want to have more than 10. Once you get more than 10, it's a little clogged, or things start to slow down pretty bad.
I think you're
So-
right. It's 20. I think
20?
20 is right.
Okay. So for very small offices, if you're first getting started, setting up a home group is a really good way to do it. But once you get over about 10, you're probably going to want to start looking at getting into a domain rather than operating off of a home group. But we'll talk about that more later. All right, devices and printers. Pretty straightforward. Here's where you go to manage the various devices you have. You would go here to upgrade your drivers, install them, other printers, other multimedia devices, scanners, fax machines, all that kind of fun stuff would all be done through this applet. Sound, already talked about it. Manage your microphones and speakers, what is going to be your primary, and how they're going to work. Next, troubleshooting. We've already seen the source code for this. This applet is used to help provide some simple solutions to common issues, although not always the most functional. And then finally, we have network and sharing center, where you can set all this stuff, like what you're allowing to share, what you're not allowing to share. Like I may want to share my movies, but not my photos. I may want to share my music, but not my documents. So you could establish all of this in your network and sharing center, and then device manager, where you have all your hardware configurations. And next. All right, critical list. You need to memorize everything on this list. Seriously kidding. This kind of gives you simple short names or commands to get to these individual applets themselves. It's just a kind of a comprehensive list. So if you want to run them executably, you can just press this in the search and it'll go right to them, or you can just search the actual name. Either way works. But if you're going to be doing it in command line to access these systems, you're going to need to know these names through command line. We're not going to get that in depth in our command line. You're going to get a very basic functional use of command line, so you can do some pretty good troubleshooting, things like that. You'll become familiar with certain commands and applications, what they're good for, how you would use them, what scenarios you would use them for, things like that. Yes, exactly. If you use them enough, you will remember them. If you spend any time away from them, you may start to forget them. That's unfortunately how it works. All right. So when you've set up groups for other people, one of the, or even people in your household, like if you don't want your kids messing around with the settings on the computer, this is a great feature. The user access control. You can, allow or restrict their access to control panels through their user accounts. All right, most issues essentially can be fixed by reverting to previous versions through restore points. Like we said, that takes you back in time to previous settings and kind of lets you roll back the clock a little bit. Be careful on using this if you have contracted malware, because a lot of malware is smart enough to infect your previous restore points. So even if you go back to a previous version, it's already been infected. And so it does not eliminate the virus or malware at that point, depending on the type of malware you contract. Next, care and caution must be exercised when you make changes. Remember to do a planned backup. So back up your data before you make any major changes to a system. This goes for your systems as well as any of your customer systems. If you're going to make a major change, make sure you back things up. All right, so you can restrict access to the UAC through the administrative password. Highly recommended. All right, group policies. So to avoid mistakes like we were talking about, when you're configuring Windows and allowing and restricting access, to various programs or data or servers, all that stuff, you can create group policies restricting the specific user accounts, which could be, your basic standard users and operations. It could be your, HR people, accounting, sales, research and development, all these different groups. They're going to have different needs, different restrictions. So you can block their access or hide individual control panel applets so they would not have access to those specific applets, which is why sometimes if you work in an office, you're like, I know this is where I go to get to this. Why can't I find it? Well, they've eliminated your ability to use it. So someplace you can do that. All right, by default, all control panel applets will show and can be configured by anyone with administrative privileges. If users need to retain their administrative rights but do not have the right to make changes to the control panel, either the whole control panel can be hidden or just specific applets within it. So you do have an editor, if you're an administrator, where you would go in and make these changes for the entire group. And this is in the search bar, start menu, you type in gpedit.msc, and that is your group editor, where you can edit the rights and permissions of anybody within the group. So, and through here, you can add new applets if you wish, either on an individual or global level. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, so here is just a visual representation. Under the group policy, you can prohibit access to the control panel, preventing them from making changes to the system. I think with that, we have reached the end of our second technical session for the day. Any questions, comments, concerns?